Hello and welcome to our first Wisden Ashes daily podcast from Manchester. England won the toss, chose to bowl and ended the day with 8 Australia wickets, Chris Woakes nabbing half of them. I'm Rana and with me this sunny evening in Manchester is Ben Gardner. Ben, who's winning?
I would say that England would be slightly the happier of the two sides. I guess normally when you insert a team, you're looking to run through them. That's the conventional wisdom of Test cricket. But this is quite an odd game and quite an odd decision because of the threat of rain and because England so desperately need to win it. So actually, it's not a decision they made with the conditions in mind. It was just that this is the way they can force proceedings onwards. So actually, getting Australia out for around 300, a bit more, they'll be pretty happy with that. They'll back themselves to get themselves up to a score that's competitive and then get themselves in position in the fourth innings to win the game. And conditions weren't that hard for batting throughout. The one thing that would maybe be a concern in another situation was that there was a little bit of turn on offer, but Australia don't have a spinner. So England really made the most of conditions. They found wickets where they kind of almost didn't, not create out of nothing, but create out of good bowling, good pressure, good use of the conditions. And Australia just didn't really kill them off, even though they built a few decent-sized partnerships.
And in terms of conditions, this pitch is not as fast as the one we saw at Headingley, where sort of every edge carried. This one, there have been quite a few already on day one, falling well short of the cordon. Let's start with the positives with England. Chris Woakes was excellent. He's taken 10 wickets in 3 innings. 9 of them have been top 7 batters, and the 10th was Alex Carey, who was batting at 8. He's had such an impact on this series.
Yeah, I mean, he's been excellent, as he so often has been in England. I mean, it's kind of just what Chris Woakes does, isn't it? And
But he was almost an accidental inclusion in the 11 at Headingley, only included after loads of guys went down with injury. Yet he has done what he has not quite always done in England, but what his record suggests he just is in England.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also before this series, we kind of thought it was almost a joke that he hadn't played, like not a joke that in terms of how could they not have picked him, it had become a bit of a running joke, right? Like he was going to look like he was going to play against Ireland, they put him up for the presser, and then he doesn't get picked. And you're like, okay, this guy might have played his last test match, and yet he's still just kind of sort of hanging around. And then he comes in and you get that reminder of just how excellent he is in these conditions. And you've written a piece for the site that explains that it's not just that he's good in helpful conditions, it's that conditions look more helpful when he's bowling, basically.
Yeah, I mean, so 7 of his 10 wickets this series have been when the ball has been between 49 and 63 overs old. So he's getting good players out with the old ball. And I think we underappreciate Woakes' skills as a bowler because his super skill is the most English skill, which is getting the Duke's ball to talk. He just does that better than pretty much anyone else. So he gets Green with a wobble seam delivery that nibbles in, and a few deliveries later he gets Marsh with a conventional away swinger that just holds its line to get the edge. Very good catch by Johnny Bairstow. And I think he gets written off as someone who relies on helpful conditions, but as you say, he's the one who actually creates conditions that are more helpful for him than anyone else. He's the one who gets the ball to talk when others don't quite get to do it. Overseas is obviously the big question. It's not even a question mark. I mean, he joked the other day when asked whether or not he will go on the tour to India next year. He just said, my away record speaks for itself. And he does struggle with a Kookaburra ball or a ball that's not the Duke's ball that doesn't move as much. But with a Duke's ball that does tend to move throughout the 80 overs, he gets it to move more than other bowlers do. And you kind of saw he's almost like a walking embodiment of English home conditions. You're never really in as a batter if you've got a bowler who's getting the ball to move. And it's taken an injury crisis for England to end up with a bloke who averages 35 with the bat and 21 with the ball in home conditions in the 11, but they have ended up with a guy who's utterly fantastic in English conditions in their side, and he's having the kind of impact you'd expect him to have.
Yeah, it's been actually the bounce he gets as well, like as much as sideways movement, like that doesn't mean much if a pitch is a bit slower and the edges are going short of the cordon. Like you saw, I mean, with the Carey wicket today, there was just a bit of bounce there. So he kind of almost went to leave it and then didn't, but it just got a bit big on him basically. And those were the 2 wickets he got on that absolutely pivotal spell on day 3 when England had that hour of cloud cover. And it was the bounce as much as it was the sideways movement that got Carey and Marsh. And that was kind of what broke the game open for England there. And I think it's the kind of the same sort of thing. Like if you're putting a lot of action on the ball, if you're putting backspin on it, that will sometimes make the ball just kick up like that. And it's not like he's, bowling Mark Wood-esque bounces, but that bounce he gets is an impact as well, I think.
Paul Ross, is this the last time we'll see Jimmy in Test cricket? Anderson's now got 3 wickets in 5 innings so far this series. He hasn't been part of a side that's won an Ashes Test since 2015. I'm not sure if that stat really means anything in particular. How did you think he bowled today? I actually thought he was fine with the new ball, and actually, despite Broad getting the 2 wickets, getting his 599th and 600th Test wickets, it was actually Anderson who ended up wicketless, who looked more threatening with the new ball in particular.
Yeah, I guess he quite often looks... He never looks bad in a way, right? You can't pick out a spell and say that is a bad James Anderson spell, really. Like, he will very rarely go for runs, and that's why it's going to take a lot, I think, for England to drop him, because there won't be anything so noticeable. It will be more like a
10% drop.
Exactly, yeah. But equally, he was a bit unlucky today, but it was also pretty clear that he really wasn't the main man by any stretch. Like, England gave him the second new ball. That almost felt like quite a generous decision from Stokes to go with that rather than with Broad. And Broad is the one now who really is the attack leader and kind of like the ringleader, and he's the one who's like the centre of everything. He goes over and sorts the crowd out. I know that Anderson has always shied away from certain aspects of that limelight, but Broad is the one who is he's dominated the series in almost like an Anderson type way, I guess.
Yeah, I do think this was Broad's worst day with the ball in the series. He offered a lot of 4 balls. He was quite speculative with the ball rather than trying to build pressure, and he picked up the 2 wickets, but yeah, I don't think he bowled. I don't think he bowled that well. I mean, my worry with Anderson isn't really how he bowled with the new ball. It's that he's visibly so stiff late in the day. Like, if you just watch him in the field, he's not far off being a liability in the field in a way that he never was. He was a brilliant fielder in his pomp, and you can just about hide him in a 5-man attack. He doesn't need to bowl that many overs, but with how much he was struggling late in the day, that he's not quite got the zip we associate with him, especially with that tight turnaround between the 4th and 5th tests. I wouldn't be shocked if this is his last Test match.
Yeah, but then equally, I wouldn't be that shocked if he's still there in India. And actually, in a way, there, if you have a bowler you can guarantee is going to go for 2 and over, that can at times be almost better than it is in England. That's when you can really want to dry the runs, when lots of quicks are going to struggle with penetration. So if you've got to pick one, you may as well pick the guy who, if the new ball is doing something, will do something with it, and if it's not, he won't go for anything, like we've seen him do, like to that ridiculous 6-4 in Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, where he just was going at a run and over and just took wickets because he bowled for ages and bowled skillfully. So it's not a question of his last Test, not the question he's somehow still here against West Indies and Sri Lanka next summer, I think.
On Australia, this innings had a very similar feel to a lot of the innings we've seen this series. An early wicket, England battled quite hard to get the next few. There's a counter-attack that threatened to take the game away from England, but England reined Australia back in before it gets too scary. As well as Woakes bowled, and I thought Wood bowled really sharply again today, and really encouraging for England. I thought it was so good to see that his second spell was actually quicker than his first spell. Are Australia doing anything wrong? Because familiarity of downfalls for batters is more damning than someone who... or a team that gets that out in different ways. Yeah,
I guess so. And you look at some of the players, and they've not been the ruthless players that we've come to associate with them. Like, Labuschagne at one point averaging, north of 60 in Test cricket. Same with Steve Smith. Those players have at times got stars, and not like even Labuschagne today. Okay, he gets his first half century of the tour, but you want your number 3 in conditions that aren't too tough for batting. When he's got 50, you want him to be taking the game away, and he's not doing that. But I think it's also kind of just maybe where this Australia batting lineup is right now. You can sort of convince yourself it's better than it is in a way. Like when you go through, if you take out Khawaja and Head, who have both had just very good series.
But even Head, he's had lots of innings like today, right, where he's been really good. He's withstood the short ball barrage somehow. He keeps on getting hit, but he gets through it. And then he threatened to take the game away from England, but he keeps on falling just before he gets to the point where he got in the World Test Championship final, where if he bats for another hour today, the game looks completely different. He hasn't quite got through that.
No, that's true, but I think that's a bit priced into how Head plays, I guess.
True.
Like especially with how he got out today. So I mean, I think Australia would take him averaging 45 and playing in that fashion as he did today. But if you go past those two, you've got Warner, who's never really done it in England. You've got Labuschagne, who are maybe coming to readjust our expectations of as a test batter. You've got Steve Smith, who is, I know, made that very good 100 early in the series, but he is slightly a fading force. He's not that kind of automaton that we've associated with him. And then you've got...
He doesn't miss that straight ball in 2019, right?
No.
You know, in 2019, England, when they didn't know what to do against Steve Smith, the plan was just bowl it straight and hope he misses one. And he missed one today. He didn't miss them in 2019, other than when he was concussed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then when you get further down, Marsh has been good, but Carey and Green have both also, they're not yet that consistent. They've both been weirdly just getting almost exactly the same start each time, and they're getting out. Carey's got 4 scores now between 20 and 22, which is an oddity, but also kind of says something about the fact that, you know, that's the kind of player he is right now, I guess. So
cool. That's it for day one. The test in the balance, sort of how it's always been this series. We'll be back with Mel Farrell the same time tomorrow.